So I'm going to tell you 4 really quick stories that I consider unusual in my life, and I think you might enjoy hearing about. The first goes way back to when I was a freshman in college, and I do say way back because, you know, it was more than 10 years ago now. And as I was in college, I was a big sci-fi freak. I was a sci-fi freak growing up. In fact, I loved reading these things. At the time, we called them books. I don't know if you still have those around here, but I love sci-fi books. And when I went to college, I had been living in Italy. So now I was back in the States, and I attended the sci-fi club on campus. In that club was a young girl who, about my age, who approached me. She liked me, and she approached me one day. She said, "Would you like to go see a movie sometime?" I said, "Sure." And she said, "Sci-fi, obviously." I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, have you seen Star Wars?" Now, having lived in Italy, I had never gone to see Star Wars. I didn't know what the big to-do was. But now, Star Wars had already been out almost a year, and it was still going strong in the theaters. And so she said, "What about Star Wars?" And I said, "Sure, why not?" And she said, "Okay, great. This is the theater. Meet me in front of it." I go there a little bit later that evening to meet her, and I don't see her anywhere. Oh, great, you know, I got stood up. No, she was there, but she was dressed up as Princess Leia. So I had not recognized her. In fact, there were a few people dressed up in costume, and I found out from her that if you dressed up in costume and there were empty seats in the theater, they would let you in for free because you were helping to promote. Oh, okay, I understand now. That's fine. I forgave her now for having dressed up like a strange character I didn't know about. We sat down in the theater. She was on my right, and we were just chit-chatting, and then finally the show's about to begin, and the lights go dark, go dimmer and dimmer, and just before that big music fair at the beginning starts, she turns to me and whispers seductively into my ear, "I've seen this movie 57 times." And so my face was like, just as the music started. And because it was the first time seeing it, she proceeded, because it was my first time and she had seen it so many times, she proceeded to show me and point out all the errors in the movie. "Oh, look at this. This is where this happens and this happens." And I won't tell you in case you've never seen the movie, okay? But there are problems in the movie. Anyway, fast forward just a little bit now, and I'm in my college dorm, okay? I was a freshman, I was in a college dorm, and every Friday night, the geekiest of us would go down to the basement where we had our rec area, and we would all gather around to watch this big CRT tube called a television at the time. It was this big, massive thing. And we would watch Battlestar Galactica, the original one, the campy one, okay? And this Friday evening, I was really tired. I was so tired. I couldn't miss Battlestar Galactica. So I trooped on down to the basement to watch Battlestar Galactica with my friends. And guess what happened? I fell asleep. I was so tired, I fell asleep on the couch down there. And nobody woke me up. I wake up, it's now pitch dark in that basement. And I'm a little, at first, disoriented. Where am I? Oh yes, I'm in the basement. Suddenly there was a big flash of light. Momentarily, just poof, flash of light. And in the air, I see a man suspended in midair. And now I'm freaking out. Like, what the hell? There's a man, and he kind of looked familiar too. And it was the strangest thing. And then I start hearing this whispering, like voices. Like this. And now I'm freaking out even more. And finally I yell, "What's going on?" And that's when it's like, "Hey, is that you, Joe?" "Yeah, what's going on?" And this was before internet, mind you. This was before people could go online and entertain themselves. This was before we had more than 3 or 4 channels of television. We had to make up our own entertainment. What they were doing in the middle of the night was very quietly sitting around on the floor in the dark while one of them held a camera, and at a cue, by tapping on the person's shoulder, that person would jump up in the air while they took a picture. And what happens is when the eyes are momentarily blinded, they see an afterimage, very strong afterimage of what happened. So I saw this, and it started fading away after a few seconds, but it was there, very vibrant. And that's when I decided to beat up these guys. But that was my first inkling into the other world, okay? Now, I'm a skeptic. I don't really believe in the other world. But okay, this sort of thing was happening to me. I had to accept the fact that these things might occasionally happen. And so it wasn't too long after that. Actually, it was long after that. It was my senior year now. And we were just I was about to graduate. And there was a show on TV called The Twilight Zone. Not the original, not that old, but this was the remake back in the 80s of The Twilight Zone. And I liked that show. It was a great show. Whatever. It was a good show. So I get home, again, it's Friday night. Friday night was the time it was on. I get home, and when I turn on the television to watch the Twilight Zone, it wasn't on. And then I remember, oh my gosh, I just remembered that they canceled it this week. It's not on anymore. So I was bummed. Just then the phone rings, and I pick up the line, hello, and I hear, hi, this is the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what? Yeah, this is the Twilight Zone. I hadn't told anybody I liked the show. I didn't know what was going on now. I said, yes, can I help you? Yeah, this is the Twilight Zone. You left your wallet here? I'm like, what? Then he explained that the campus bookstore had a new area called the Twilight Zone that was open late into the evening. Of course, they hadn't yet put up a sign or anything that would give you an inkling to that, but somehow he thought I should know that, okay? And I didn't. So I'm freaking out because I just finished moping over the fact that the Twilight Zone had been canceled, and the Twilight Zone called me, and yes, I had to trudge back to campus to pick up my wallet from the Twilight Zone. All true stories. Years after, married, kids, in my house, my wife wakes me up in the middle of the night. She says, Joe, something's going on. I get up, and I go in the hall, and I can see that downstairs, somebody's downstairs, must be, because there's a light turning on and off, just like this. We were the only two people in the house at the time. So I grabbed my imaginary weapons, which I didn't have any of, and I went downstairs and went to see what was going on, very quietly as I could. Hated the fact that one of the steps was creaking, hated that. But when I got down there, I saw that the light was in fact turning on and off all by itself in the kitchen. And now I'm like, okay, what's going on? I go in there and to see if anybody's in there, and there's nobody in there. But the light keeps turning on and off. I look over at the switch. This is a switch just like this one here. Standard American switch. And I see it's stuck in the middle, and it's moving up and down. Like this. And now I'm really freaking out, like, what's going on here? So I did what any sane person would do. I turned it off. And it stayed off. And the next thing I did the next morning was to go to Home Depot and buy a new switch. And that forever rid me of that poltergeist or ghost, whatever it was. And so I had to know. I asked a friend later who was an electrician. I said, Steve, what's going on? This is a strange thing I've never seen. And he goes, oh, wow, that's kind of rare, but it does happen. If you get stuck just in the right place, then it goes, it circuits on, but then the little electrical impulse pushes it down again, and then up again, and up and down. And I was like, wow. He said, that is a really rare thing, but it does happen. Okay, only to me, obviously, but it does happen. So, final little story, and this one really spooked me, was we were living in our old house, and we had just moved in fact, and we were doing some yard work, my wife and I. And as we moved up to where we were going to have our flower garden, I hear very subdued music. I didn't think anything of it. Oh, okay, the music's coming from somewhere. It was kind of haunting though. Like this. Okay, so I stepped away and it stopped. Okay, so I stepped back. I stepped away again. I said, honey, can you come over here? She comes over and she's like, what's going on? I said, just watch. So I step in closer, nothing. I said, there's music coming from somewhere. She goes, no, there isn't. I said, honest to God, I heard music. He goes, okay, doctor time. No. I said, just wait. And so I started stepping, I said, and then it started again. She goes, ooh, where is that coming from? She says, it sounds like it's coming from under the ground. I'm like, oh. She goes, you know you gotta dig for it, right? I'm like, what am I gonna find down there? New house? What, bags of bones now? Am I gonna find to leave my house? So yeah, I was a trooper. I got my shovel and I started shoveling. And I put that spade down into the ground. And I put the first plot of dirt up. And just as I was flinging to the side, I noticed something shimmering in there. I thought, oh God, what is that? I got in closer and took a look. And yes, it was a little metal thing. And what was it? I pressed it and music came on. I saw it. It was out of one of those stupid Hallmark cards. It was one of those little mechanisms that when you open the card, it makes music. And here it was, somehow tossed on the ground, and it was probably just a half inch or an inch underneath the ground. Somebody must have dropped it and it got covered up with dirt and noticed it. But boy, oh boy, it was years before I would buy another Hallmark card after that. Thanks.